Hey, baby.
You left so fast this morning. You didn't even take your jacket.
I know I'm sorry. It was an emergency dad's chest thing again.
Is he awake?
He's fine, getting better already. They're just keeping him overnight for observation. I'm sitting right here with him now, holding his hand.
One more thing, David.
Yeah? What?
When you're finished eating at the restaurant, tell your father I wish him a speedy recovery. The lamb looks nice. Enjoy it.
Wait! Kuwait!
My husband skipped my mom's funeral for work, but 3 blocks from the cemetery, still in my funeral black, I saw him at a restaurant with his lover, laughing over 2 glasses of wine at the corner table my mother loved. Marin, my husband, Weston, sold real estate and swore a deal was collapsing the morning we buried my mom. He held my face and said she'd understand. So I sat in that church alone, the seat beside me empty, and told everyone he was devastated, stuck at work. I believed him. I want you to remember that I believed him. But the woman across that restaurant table, her hand resting on top of his, wasn't a stranger. I knew the green dress she was wearing. I'd been standing right next to her when she bought it, and she was supposed to be somewhere else that afternoon too. She'd texted me at dawn. A migraine. So sorry. I love you. She'd been my best friend for 20 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She brought soup to my dying mother. So if my husband was never at work, and my best friend was never sick, then who exactly had been lying to me the longest? And how long had the 2 people I'd have called to survive this already been surviving me? Let me take you back to that morning. 6 hours before the restaurant. Before I knew. The house was too quiet. That's the first thing I remember. My mother had been dying for 2 years, and dying is loud. It's oxygen machines and pill bottles and phones ringing and people whispering in kitchens. Then it stops. And the silence that comes after isn't peace. It's a hole shaped exactly like a person. I was standing at the mirror trying to zip my own dress. My hands wouldn't work. They just wouldn't. I'd zipped 1,000 dresses in my life, and that morning my fingers shook like I was freezing. And I wasn't cold at all. Weston, I called. Can you help me? He came out of the closet, and I saw the jeans. Not a suit. Jeans. The good ones, the dark ones, and a gray quarter zip like he was headed to grab coffee and read emails. My brain saw the clothes and just refused them. The way you refuse a word in a language you don't speak. You're not dressed, I said, stupidly, like maybe he hadn't noticed. And that's when his face did the thing. I know that face now. I've replayed it 10,000 times. It's the face of a man who has already decided, and is about to make you think you decided with him. Marin. He set his phone down on the dresser, screen first. I noticed that. I noticed and I let it go. Baby, I have to tell you something and I need you to not hate me. My stomach dropped through the floor. What? The Bishop deal collapsed. Overnight. The buyer's financing fell through, and if I'm not in that office in an hour to save it, it's dead. The whole thing. And that's, Marin, that's the commission we've been counting on. For the bills. For your mom's bills. He said my mom's bills. On the morning of my mom's funeral. He reached into the open wound and he used it as a handle. Weston, it's the funeral. My voice came out small. It's today. It's in 2 hours. I know. He crossed the room and he took my face in both his hands, and his palms were warm and familiar, and I let myself lean into them because I was so tired and I needed something to hold me up. I know, and I hate it, I hate myself for it. But your mother, Adele. She was the most practical woman I ever met. You know what she'd say? She'd say go protect your family. She'd want me keeping a roof over your head. Not sitting in a pew. He put words in my dead mother's mouth. And I nodded. God help me, I nodded. Okay. I whispered. You're the strongest person I know. He kissed my forehead. I'll be there in spirit. I love you so much. And then he was gone. I heard the garage door grind open, then close. I heard his car. And I stood there in a half-zip dress in a house that was too quiet. And I finished zipping it myself, one hard breath at a time. Here's what I didn't let myself think about until much later. His bag was already by the door, packed, like he'd known the night before that he wouldn't be coming to bury my mother. The church was full. That's the thing about a woman like my mom. Adele Whitfield knew everyone, remembered everyone, mattered to everyone. There were people there I hadn't seen since I was a kid. People she'd fed. People she'd forgiven. And every single one of them, at some point, leaned toward me and asked the same question. "Where's Weston?" And I lied. Over and over, in the softest voice I owned, I lied for him. There was an emergency at work. He's just devastated he couldn't be here. He tried everything. I got so good at it. That should have scared me. How easily the lie came, how much practice my mouth already had at covering the shape of his absence. But I was too deep in the fog to notice. My sister Joss sat on my left. She reached across the empty chair on my right, Weston's chair, and she held my hand the whole service, and she never once asked where he was. Because Joss already had her opinion of my husband, and this was just one more brick in a wall she'd been building for years. And there was one more empty seat. 2 rows back. Aisle side. The seat I'd saved for Delaney. Delaney Cross. 20 years. We met at 19. 2 broke girls sharing a plate of fries because we could only afford one. She stood beside me in a lavender dress the day I married Weston and cried harder than I did. When my mother got sick, Delaney showed up. She brought soup in glass jars with the lids taped so they wouldn't spill. She sat in hospital hallways with me at 2 in the morning. She held me in a parking garage while I sobbed so hard I couldn't stand. And she said, "I've got you. I've always got you." That morning she'd texted me before the sun was even up. "Marin, I'm so sorry. One of my migraines, the bad kind, I can't even lift my head. I would give anything to be there. Your mom was my mom too. I love you. I'm so sorry." And I texted back, "It's okay. Rest. I love you." And I meant every word, because if anyone on this earth had earned the right to miss one hard day, it was the woman who'd never missed a single one before. 2 empty chairs. My husband's and my best friend's. And I sat there between them, holding my sister's hand, and I could not put those 2 empty chairs next to each other in my mind. That's the cruelty of trust. It doesn't just hide the knife. It hands you 100 gentle reasons to look the other way while it goes in. The service ended. The burial was worse. It always is. There's a sound a casket makes, and I won't describe it because you don't need to carry that. I threw a handful of dirt. I said goodbye to the only person who'd loved me my whole life without ever once making me earn it. And then it was over, and people drifted to the reception. And I stood at my mother's fresh grave alone in the cold sun and felt the whole world tilt sideways. Joss found me. "Come to the reception. Just for an hour. Then I'll drive you home." "I'll drive myself," I said. "I need a minute. I'll meet you there." She looked at me a long time. "My sister has good instincts." "You sure?" "I'm sure. I just need to breathe." So I got in my car, alone, with my mother's cardigan folded on the passenger seat where a husband should have been sitting. I'd grabbed it from her house that morning because it still smelled like her hand lotion and her kitchen, and I couldn't leave it behind. I didn't take the highway. I couldn't face the highway, all that speed and noise. I took the slow streets, the long way, the way you drive when you are not ready to arrive anywhere at all. Windows cracked. Radio off. Just me and a folded sweater and the emptiest feeling a human body can hold. And that's the road that goes past Marchetti's. I have to tell you about Marchetti's so you understand. It's a little Italian place with a brick front and a patio out back strung with little white lights they never take down. Summer or winter. My mother loved it. Not fancy, just warm. We celebrated everything there. My 30th birthday. Her 65th. My first job. There's a corner table on the patio, half tucked under the lights, and my mom always asked for that one. The lucky table, she called it. Everything good in this family happened at that table, Marin. So when I drove past, I looked. Of course I looked. You look at the places that hold your good memories the way you'd look at a photograph of someone you just lost. It was almost tender, that glance. For half a second it was the softest thing I'd felt all day. And then the softness turned to ice in my veins. Because there was a man at the lucky table. and he was laughing. I knew that laugh. I'd know it in the dark, in a crowd, in my sleep. 11 years of marriage teaches you the exact shape of a man's laugh. My foot came off the gas without me telling it to. The car slowed to almost nothing. It was Weston. Not in a gray quarter zip. Not in the office saving a dying deal, protecting our family, keeping a roof over my head. He was in a crisp white shirt I had never seen before. A shirt I did not buy, did not wash, did not fold, and he was leaning back in his chair at my mother's lucky table with a glass of red wine catching the light, laughing like a man without a single weight on his soul. There were 2 glasses, and across from him, back half turned to the street, was a woman. I couldn't see her face. I saw a bare shoulder. I saw dark hair pinned up the way you pin it when you want to feel pretty. I saw one hand, her hand, resting on top of his on the white tablecloth, easy and comfortable, the touch of 2 people who have touched 1,000 times before. And I saw the dress, green, a specific green, deep like a forest with a little tie at the waist. I knew that dress. I knew that dress because I had been standing 3 feet away in a fitting room 8 months ago when a saleswoman zipped it up, and a voice I'd loved for 20 years spun around and said, "Okay, be honest. Is this too much for a work thing?" And I'd said, "Delaney, you look incredible. Buy it." My hands went cold on the steering wheel. My mouth went dry. Somewhere far away a car honked because I'd slowed to a crawl in the middle of the road, and I didn't even hear it as a sound, just felt it like a needle. The woman in the green dress. The one with the migraine. The one who couldn't lift her head. The one who'd texted "I love you. I'm so sorry" while I stood at my mother's grave. She turned her head, just slightly, laughing at whatever he'd said, and the string lights caught her profile. And there was no more looking away. Delaney, my best friend of 20 years. The maid of honor at my wedding. The woman who brought soup to my dying mother in glass jars with the lids taped shut. Sitting at my mother's lucky table, holding my husband's hand. On the day I buried my mom. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the honking car swerved around me and was gone. Long enough that the light at the end of the block turned green, then red, then green again while I sat in the middle of a road I'd driven 1,000 times, unable to move. My body knew before my mind would let it. That's a real thing, I've learned that since. The heart understands the truth a full minute before the brain agrees to sign for it. My chest had gone tight and my ears were ringing and my hands were ice on the wheel, and some calm, faraway voice in me was still saying, "Maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe there's an explanation, maybe." And then Weston lifted her hand off the table and kissed her knuckles. Slow. Easy. The way you kiss someone when you've kissed them for months. The faraway voice stopped talking. I pulled over. There was a closed dry cleaner half a block down with an empty lot. And I turned in and put the car in park and I sat there shaking. Not crying. I want you to understand that. I was too far past crying. Too hollowed out by 2 years of watching my mother die. The grief I'd carried into that car had nowhere to go now because the 2 people I would have called to survive a day like this, the 2 people I trusted most in the entire world, were 60 yards behind me at a table under white lights, drinking wine. My mother's cardigan was on the seat. I picked it up. I pressed it to my face and I breathed in her hand lotion in her kitchen. And I made a sound I'd never made before, something low, an animal sound, and then I made myself stop. Because I could see them in the mirror if I angled it right, and I needed, God, I don't even know why, I needed to watch. I watched him pour her more wine. I watched her laugh and put her head on his shoulder. And then my phone buzzed in the cup holder. And I looked down, and it was him. "Nightmare here, babe, might be hours. So sorry I'm missing everything. How you holding up? Red heart. A little red heart." He typed that with her head on his shoulder. He asked how I was holding up while she was leaning into him at my mother's lucky table. The wine still in his glass. His thumb moving on that screen while his other arm was around my best friend. I looked at that red heart for a long, long time. And here's where something happened that I still don't fully understand, except that maybe 2 years of dying teaches you a terrible patience. Every part of me wanted to throw the car in reverse, drive it up onto that patio, and set the whole world on fire. Flip the table. Scream until the lights fell down. Make a scene they'd talk about for the rest of their lives. But a colder, quieter voice underneath all of it said, "No, not yet. You don't know how big this is. And you cannot think clearly with your hand on the pin of a grenade." So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I typed back, "It's okay. Do what you have to do. I love you." I hit send. I watched the little heart he'd get. And I drove home, because I needed the truth before I needed the fight. And people who lie for a living, they only stay careless as long as they think you're still buying it. The next 9 days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was a grieving widow of a marriage that wasn't dead yet. Weston came home that night around 11, smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize under a shirt he'd changed back into gray, and he wrapped me in his arms and said, "I am so sorry. I'll make it up to you. The deal closed, at least. Your mom would be glad it wasn't for nothing." He looked me right in the eyes when he said it. And I looked right back and I said, "I know you did your best." And I let him hold me. And I have never in my life felt so far away from a person whose arms were around me. Because I'd made a decision in that dry cleaner parking lot. I was not going to accuse. I was going to learn. And you cannot learn anything from a person who knows you're watching. So I became quiet. I became a woman collecting pieces. The first piece was the deal. The Bishop deal. The collapsing deal. The emergency that couldn't wait. The commission we were counting on for my mother's bills. I had access to our shared accounts. I'd handled our money for years. So one night while he slept, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the blue light on my face and I looked. There was no Bishop deal that week. No closing. No emergency wire. No commission. Nothing. But there was a charge. 3 weeks earlier. A jeweler downtown. Almost $4,000. And I sat there in the dark running my thumb over my bare wrist, my bare neck, my hands with only my wedding ring on them, and I understood that whatever he'd bought at that jeweler had never, not once, been meant for me. That was piece one. My hands didn't even shake anymore. That scared me more than the shaking had. The second piece was the migraine. 2 years earlier, Delaney and I had gone on a girls' trip, a cheap little beach weekend, and we'd shared our locations on our phones so we could find each other in the crowd. And like most people, neither of us ever turned it off. I'd forgotten it was even there. But that night I opened the app, and there she was, a little glowing dot with her name on it. And I did the thing I'll never be able to undo. I looked at her location history for the day of the funeral. At 6:04 in the morning, when she texted me that she couldn't lift her head, her dot was at home. At 1:40 in the afternoon, while I was standing at my mother's grave throwing dirt onto her casket, her dot was at Marchetti's. The migraine that kept her from burying the woman she called a second mother did not keep her from the lucky table. I closed the laptop very gently. I remember that. I closed it gently like a person setting down something breakable, and then I walked to the bathroom and I was quietly, thoroughly sick. But the third piece is the one that changed me forever. The third piece is the one I still feel when I wake up some mornings. Because once I started looking, I couldn't stop. I went back through 8 months of Weston's calendar. The late closings, the showings that ran long, the client dinners. And I laid them next to my own memory of 8 months of Delaney's excuses. The nights she was too wiped to talk. The weekends she just needed to sleep. The times she canceled on me last minute with a sad little face. They matched. Night after night after night, they matched. It had started 8 months ago, which meant it had started while my mother was still alive. While Delaney was bringing soup in taped glass jars. While she sat with me in that hospital hallway at 2 in the morning. While she held me in the parking garage and said, "I've got you. I've always got you." She was already living a second life with my husband. She held me while I cried and she was already gone. She fed my dying mother with the same hands that I couldn't finish the thought. I still can't all the way. And that I need you to hear this because this is the true center of the whole thing. That was the part that broke something permanent in me. Not the affair. Affairs are old as the world. It was the soup. It was the performance. It was 20 years of "I've always got you" laid on top of a betrayal she was living every single day. She didn't just take my husband. She took my grief and she used it as cover. I called my sister. Joss came over the next morning while Weston was at work, And I put it all in front of her. The jeweler charge, the location, the 8 months of matching lies. And I watched my sister's face go from confusion to horror to a fury so pure it seemed to lower the temperature of the room. "That's it," she said, standing up so fast her chair scraped. "We're done. I'm calling her right now. I'm calling him. I'll send it to everybody we know. Today. This ends today." And I understood the pull of it. God, I did. There is nothing on this earth that would have felt better in that moment than blowing it all up. But I thought about my mother. I thought about a thing Adele Whitfield used to say to me when I was a girl and someone had wronged me and I wanted to burn the world down over it. She'd take my chin in her hand and she'd say, "Baby, don't ever set yourself on fire to keep a liar warm." "Joss," I said, "sit down. Please. Marin, if we blow it up now, I'm the crazy one. I'm the hysterical, grieving wife making accusations. They'll comfort each other. They'll close ranks. He'll spin it, he will. He could sell a house on fire. He can absolutely sell my wife lost it after her mom died." My own voice sounded strange to me. So steady. So cold. But if I stay quiet, if I just stop covering for them, they'll keep going. And people who think no one's watching always get sloppy. I don't have to expose them, Joss. I just have to stop protecting them. And then I have to watch what they do with the room I give them. My sister stared at me for a long moment. And then something in her face shifted from fury into something quieter and, I think, a little afraid, because she was seeing a version of me she'd never met before. "That's cold, Marin," she said softly. "No," I said. "Cold is bringing soup to a woman you're already betraying. This is just clear." So that's what I did. I didn't detonate anything. I stopped lying for Weston at parties. I just went quiet and let people wonder why he was never around. I stopped defending Delaney when a mutual friend mentioned how weird it was she'd missed the funeral. I just said, "Yeah, it was strange," and let it sit there. I stopped filling the silences their absences left. And silence, it turns out, is the loudest thing in the world. It makes people nervous. It makes them explain things nobody asked them to explain. And quietly, in the background, I got smart. I moved my inheritance, the money my mother had left me, money I had never once mixed with our accounts, into a new account with only my name on it. Clean. Legal. Mine. I made an appointment with a lawyer for the following week. I started a folder. Screenshots of the location dots. A photo of the jeweler charge. The calendar. All of it saved. Quiet. Ready. I didn't know yet what I was building it for. Part of me thought I'd never use it at all. But I knew this much, sitting at my mother's kitchen table in the blue laptop light. Whatever I did next, I was going to do it knowing everything. Not screaming in the blind heat of the worst day of my life. And then, 11 days after I buried my mother, Weston came home early, sat down across from me at the table, and said the words that told me the ground was about to move again. "Babe," he said, rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was about to lie. "I've been thinking, with everything you've been through, maybe you and I should get away for a weekend. Just us. Reconnect." He reached across the table and took my hand. The same hand I'd watched him kiss under the string lights. "What do you say?" he smiled. "Somewhere romantic. My treat." And I smiled back, and I felt the folder waiting on my laptop, and I thought, he has no idea. He has absolutely no idea who he's sitting across from now. I said yes to the romantic weekend. I know how that sounds. But I needed one more week. 1 week for the lawyer, 1 week to make sure the money was where it needed to be, 1 week to be absolutely certain. So I smiled across the table and I said, "I'd love that." And I watched relief wash over his face. And I understood something that made my skin cold. He wasn't relieved because he loved me. He was relieved because a happy wife doesn't look too closely. He thought he was buying my silence with a beach. He had no idea I'd already bought my own. The romantic weekend never happened, because 5 days later I sat in a quiet office with soft carpet and a box of tissues I didn't need. And a lawyer named Ruth slid a folder across the desk and said, "Everything's in order. The inheritance is protected. When you're ready, you serve him." "I'm ready," I said. And I was. That's the strangest part of this whole story. I wasn't shaking anymore. The woman who couldn't zip her own dress on the morning of the funeral was gone. Something quieter and much harder to break had grown up in her place. I didn't ambush him. I didn't need to. I chose a Tuesday night, at our own kitchen table, the same table where he'd offered me a beach to keep me quiet. I made coffee, 2 cups, and when he sat down, I put a single envelope in front of him. "What's this?" he said, still smiling, still not getting it. "Open it." He did, and I watched his face come apart in slow motion. The smile first, then the color, then the whole practiced charm of him sliding right off his bones. "Marin." His voice cracked. "What? Where is this coming from? Baby, talk to me. We can fix whatever this is." And here's the thing I'm proudest of in this entire story. I didn't scream. I didn't say her name. I didn't play the video I didn't have or throw the jeweler receipt or show him the little glowing dot at Marchetti's at 1:40 in the afternoon. I didn't hand him the fight he was so clearly braced for, the one where he could be the reasonable one and I could be the wife who lost it after her mother died. I just said, quietly, "It's over, Weston. Please be out by the weekend." And I picked up my coffee and I drank it and I let the silence do the rest. He begged. He got angry. He got tender. He cycled through every version of himself he'd ever used to manage me, one after another, faster and faster, and none of them worked because none of them had anything to grab onto. A man braced for a hurricane doesn't know what to do with a closed door. He kept waiting for the scene so he could win it. It never came. Finally, near midnight, he said the thing that told me everything. He said, "Is there someone else? Is that what this is? Did somebody put ideas in your head?" He was so busy hiding his affair that he genuinely wondered if I was having one. That's the whole psychology of a cheater, right there in one sentence. They assume the whole world is running the same con they are. "No, Weston," I said. "There's no one else. There's just me." Finally, he moved out that weekend. And he ran exactly where I knew he'd run, straight to Delaney. And this is where I want you to lean in because this is the part nobody warns the liars about. I didn't have to destroy them. I just stopped being the thing that held them apart. See, for 8 months, their whole romance had run on danger. The stolen afternoons, the secret texts, the thrill of getting away with it right under my nose. I was the obstacle that made it exciting. And the moment I was gone, the moment there was no wife to sneak around, no risk, no married man rushing home before she got suspicious, they had to look at each other in plain daylight and find out what was actually there. It turned out there wasn't much. I heard it in pieces, the way you hear these things, from Joss, from mutual friends, from the slow drip of a small world. Once he actually moved into her apartment, the fantasy curdled fast. She'd betrayed her best friend of 20 years to be with him. Now she got to lie awake wondering what a man like that does to the woman he's with when the next thrill comes along. And him? He traded a marriage for a woman who'd proven she'd knife the person she loved most for a night at a restaurant. Trust is a strange thing to demand from someone you built out of betrayal. Then the money. There was no Bishop deal. There'd never been steady money the way he'd made me believe. And that jeweler charge, the almost $4,000? Delaney found the receipt one day. A necklace. She thought it was for her, this grand romantic gift. It wasn't. It turned out he'd told her the exact same story he'd told me. Spun her the same lines, made her the same promises, right down to the words. She found out she wasn't the great love that ended a marriage. She was just the next room he was standing in. Within 2 months, they were screaming at each other over money he didn't have and promises he'd made to 2 women at once. He moved out of her place before the leaves changed. I didn't say a single word against either of them. I didn't have to. Silence, it turns out, is the loudest possible way to stop covering for someone. When I stopped narrating their lie, the truth got very loud on its own. And the people came back. One by one, our mutual friends did the quiet arithmetic. 8 months of migraines that lined up with 8 months of late closings. And they came back around to me. Some to apologize for the things they'd wondered about me. Most just to say, finally, "I'm so sorry about your mom," which no one had really gotten to say the first time, because Weston's story had crowded out my grief. His lie had even stolen my mother's funeral from the people who wanted to mourn her with me. Getting that back. Getting to just be a daughter who lost her mother, That was worth more than any revenge I could have taken. Delaney called me once. Months later. Late at night. I almost didn't answer. But 20 years is 20 years, and some part of me needed to hear it. She was crying. Real crying, I think, though I've learned I'm not the expert on her honesty I once believed I was. She said she would never forgive herself. She said my mother had loved her like a daughter, had called her family, and she'd spat on all of it. She said she didn't even recognize the person she'd become. And then she asked the question she'd really called to ask. Is there any way? She whispered. Any way at all, that someday you and I could be okay again? And I want to tell you what I said, because it took me a year to understand it was the kindest thing I had left to give. Kind to her, but mostly kind to me. I said, Delaney, I forgive you. I heard her breath catch, this little gasp of hope. But forgiving you isn't the same as coming back, I said. I forgive you because I refuse to carry you around inside me for the rest of my life. You don't get to be a weight I drag everywhere. But some doors, once you walk out of them the way you did, you don't get to walk back through. I hope you find peace. I really do. Just not with me. And I hung up. And I sat in my new apartment, because by then I'd sold the house with too many ghosts. My small place with better light, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt light. There's a difference, and it took me almost a year to learn it. Revenge makes you feel powerful for an evening. Letting go makes you feel free for good. Which brings me to the last thing. The thing I'm actually proud of. On the first anniversary of the day I buried my mother, I drove to the cemetery. I brought daylilies because Mom always said they were tougher than they looked, and they keep coming back every single year no matter what the winter does to them. She was like that. I'm trying to be. I sat down in the grass by her stone, and I read her name and the 2 dates that held her whole enormous life between them, and I told her everything. Out loud. Like she could hear me. Maybe she could. And then I took out my phone. Because I still had it. All of it. The folder. The screenshots of the little glowing dot at 1:40. The jeweler charge. 8 months of matched up lies laid side by side like teeth. A whole case built and loaded that I had never once needed to fire. I could have sent it to the world at any moment. I kept it a full year, telling myself I might need it someday, telling myself it was insurance. I sat there by my mother's grave with that folder in my hand, and I finally understood what it really was. It wasn't a weapon. It was a chain, and I'd been the one wearing it. For a full year I'd carried the worst day of my life around in my pocket, ready to relive it, protecting it, feeding it. And my mother's voice came to me, clear as the morning she took my chin in her hand. Don't set yourself on fire to keep a liar warm. So I opened the folder, and I deleted it. Every screenshot, every receipt, every glowing dot, all of it gone. Not because they deserved to be free of it, because I did. The people who mattered already knew the truth. The ones who chose the other version were never really mine. And I was done being the keeper of the worst thing that ever happened to me. I laid the daylilies against the base of the stone. The sun was warm. Somewhere a bird was going on about something. And my phone buzzed. A friend, asking if I was still coming to dinner that night. I typed back, yes, I'll be there, looking forward to it. And for the first time in a very long time, I meant all 3 things at once. My mother used to say the truest thing about a person is who they are on the day they're certain no one is keeping score. Weston was certain no one was watching that Tuesday at the lucky table on the day we buried my mom. Someone was watching, and she turned out to be so much stronger than either of them ever believed she could be. So before you go, I want to ask you something. Sit with it because I still do. If the 2 people you trusted most in this whole world betrayed you on the worst day of your life, would you have the strength to burn it all down, or the far rarer strength to simply put it down, walk away, and let your peace be the only revenge you ever needed? Tell me the truth in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this story reached something in you, if you know that particular silence in the passenger seat, share it with the one person you'd want beside you on your hardest day. Then stay for the next one. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting in a parked car, phone in their hand, deciding whether to type "it's okay" one more time. Maybe this is the story that reaches them.